Conversations across time, 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 across time, conversations.
Hi, I'm Mark Hoffman, the show historian for Conversations Across Time. In the year 2017, I portrayed the character of Ulysses S. Grant, and we did a show called The Bastardization of the Second Amendment and the NRA. Now it's 5 years later, and the problems still exist that deal with gun control, mass shootings, and nothing has been done. In the year 2017, right after the shooting in Sutherland, Texas, where 26 people were killed, as Grant, I went into the history of the NRA. I was the eighth president as Grant, and we talked about the function of the NRA had nothing to do with individuals owning assault weapons and guns. It was to train people for the correct use of guns. So it's been bastardized by the conservatives and it's been bastardized by the NRA itself. And we were going to rerun some of those shows from 2017, and we were totally prophetic. I remember Irv Madnick, one of our attorneys and one of the cast members, predicting that unless we pass some sort of gun control, especially of assault weapons, Irv said we're going to have more and more of these shootings. Here it's 5 years later, and there's been over 3 million different types of mass murders throughout the country. It's ridiculous, and we have to do something. And I'm going to return the show to our host and attorney, Vivienne Crawford, and she will introduce Irv, who will talk about the Heller case and how that bastardized the Second Amendment as well.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Conversations Across Time. You just heard Mark Hoffman speak about the NRA and what has happened in this country since we taped the shows that will be following sequentially after this episode. It is sad, and I don't think either Irv, who predicted that we were going to have more shootings, or Mark, who at that time was playing Ulysses Grant. I don't think any of us are happy to sit here and say, "Oh, you see, we said this 5 years ago," because you know this. You know what is happening. You are aware that every time that there is a mass shooting, there are thoughts and prayers and not anything else. The Senate seems to not have the political will. The House of Representatives keeps passing legislation, but it doesn't get beyond the Senate because they don't have the political will to stand up to the NRA. And listen, yes, there are mental health problems, but there are mental health issues in other uh, development countries. And why is it that we just have this vast amount of shootings here in the United States? You don't think Great Britain has mentally ill people, that France has mentally ill people? I mean, there are mentally ill people in all of the other societies, yet they are not suffering the egregious number of mass killings that we are. So, at any rate, I'm going to introduce. I want to bring back our dear friend, and uh, he's such a good person to have talking about this because as in his career as defense counsel, he defended um, incidents where there were guns involved. But I don't think Irving was anything like it is now. So Irv Madnick, um, welcome. I'm glad you're with us. And can you please give us some understanding of the Heller decision?
Sure. Let me start first with a literal reading of the Second Amendment, because I think that's really important. The Second Amendment, let me just pull it up because I want to read it exactly the way it is. And we'll go from there. It says, this is the Second Amendment now. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, when you read that literally, the main portion of this goes to a militia, a regular militia. They're talking about a militia. The militia turned out to be, in today's terms, the National Guard. Each state has a National Guard. And the import of this was that the federal government could not just take over any state. The state had rights, and their rights were protected by a military, by the militia, by the National Guard. And the addition of this, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, relates back to the militia. It does not, a literal reading of this does not give an individual the right to carry a weapon. However, because of the way it's written, and it does make reference to the right of the people to if you just isolate that one fragment of a sentence, it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, without relating it back to militia. Well, it seems to say that everybody would have a right to carry a gun. Of course, that's not what it means. As a matter of fact, Warren Burger, who was Chief Justice for many, many years, noted that was what the literal meaning of this is. If they meant, let's just say that they did mean to have gave everybody the right to carry a gun, they would have written it like the right of for the security of the people, the right of the people have a right to keep and bear arms. And that's what they would say. And that would mean that everybody would have a right to carry a gun. And that's the way, unfortunately, the conservatives on the court in Heller in 2008 interpreted the Constitution on the Second Amendment to overrule a law in the District of Columbia, which for all intents and purposes would not allow an individual to carry or have or own a handgun. The law was that handguns could not be carried, could not be owned by people unless the police issued a special permit, which was very, very restrictive. And most people couldn't get that permit because, of course, they didn't need to carry a handgun. Also, it said if you did have a legal right to a handgun in the home, it had to be locked, or else there would be a trigger lock on it or a lock, or disassembled so it couldn't be used. So the decision said that, well, that's in violation of the Second Amendment, because they interpreted the Second Amendment to mean that every individual had a right to a handgun. And therefore, if you had it locked in your home, it wouldn't be any use to you for security if it was locked or disassembled. And you wouldn't be able to defend yourself otherwise if you had a right to a handgun, and you should be able to carry a handgun. So that's what the Heller decision was. Now, interestingly enough, it only, if I may, it only referred to handguns. And it's just like any other right, I'd say, that anybody has, like the right to, let's say, the right to free speech. There's no absolute right to free speech. I mean, as noted in a famous Supreme Court decision, a person doesn't have the right to scream fire in a crowded theater if there's no fire there and create a tremendous panic. And you don't have the right to defame people. There's laws against libel and slander. So there's no such thing as absolute free speech. And just as there's no absolute free speech, there's no absolute right to have a gun, even under this decision. This decision only related to handguns. So if you wanted to, you could have a ban on assault weapons, on AR-15s, the weapon of choice now in all these mass murders where they kill little babies and women and people in church. They use an AR-15, which can fire off hundreds of rounds in a minute with very devastating ammunition that rips people apart and absolutely kills them. It's just ridiculous. How, as a matter of fact, from 1994 to 2004, there was an absolute ban on assault weapons. And the statistics show that during that period of time, there were fewer mass murders then when it went back into effect, when the Republicans came back into power in 2004, Bush did away with the ban on assault weapons, and automatically, as a result of that, the mass shootings went up, and there was Parkland and Texas and all of these other
El
instances
Paso,
and
yes.
church killings where multiple people were killed with AR. And the one in Las Vegas, where a guy stood out a hotel window and was able to kill 50, 60, 70 people and injure hundreds of people with an assault weapon.
Now,
I'm
one
sorry,
of the
Vivienne.
may I just I want to throw something out. You mentioned Chief Justice Berger, and I would like to I'd like to read the statement that he made, and this was a statement that he made January 14th, 1990. He was Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, and what's interesting is he was conservative, and he was appointed by Nixon. At any rate, this was his statement in 1990. The gun lobby's interpretation of the Second Amendment is one of the greatest pieces of fraud. I repeat the word fraud on the American people by special interest groups that I have seen in my lifetime. The real purpose of the Second Amendment was to ensure that state armies, the militia, would be maintained for the defense of the state. The very language of the Second Amendment refutes any argument that it was intended to guarantee every citizen an unfettered right to any kind of weapon he or she desires. That was the statement that you were referring to, Irv,
Right.
that Chief Justice Berger made.
Right.
You know,
Well, I'm sorry.
I'm sort of
Go ahead.
lost for words when we talk about this, simply because they have been so successful in portraying the NRA, as you mentioned, or the Second Amendment as an absolute right, and it doesn't say
Right.
that, it didn't mean that, but yet our political leaders don't have the will to go against the entire gun lobby, because we say the NRA, but reality is there are other gun associations, but it's the manufacturers, because most responsible gunmen owners they want background checks. We can agree on that. We can agree that if you've got a record, if there's any sort of felonies, that you shouldn't be able to get it. Most gun owners, by and large, that is what they believe. But I'm going to, because I feel so passionate about this, and I sometimes think we're just talking to the walls. But Mark, what do you? I mean, where do you think we're headed with this?
Well, I think Irv and yourself both articulated it quite well. The problem is, it's kind of, deja vu all over again. We said the same thing when we did the show in 2017. It's 5 years later. Congress has refused to act. The Senate really has refused to act. They're all bought, they're bought and sealed, signed, and delivered by the, like you said, the gun lobby. And nothing's going to get done now. Even now, when they're negotiating in a bipartisan way, they're talking about mental health and red flags. It's a simple solution: ban assault weapons. Irv gave the statistics about when there was an assault weapon ban, how safer the country was. And I mean, you have to be blind not to see what we have to do. I was just talking to somebody today that was a gun owner, and he told me he was in a gun show at Fort Washington, Pennsylvania. And he said it was packed. He had to park outside of the parking lot to get in. And the lines, and in Pennsylvania, in our state, there are background checks. They do it right in person. But he said it was a 3-hour wait for the background checks. Walking out, he ran into a young kid, 19 years old. The kid had over 500 rounds of ammunition. So he said to the kid, what do you need 500 rounds for? And he said, just in case. Now that's where we're at.
That was his answer, just in case.
We need a ban.
Let me just say this. Right, absolutely. And better red flag laws, which stop people who are felons and violent people from having guns, and put in give licensing to people. People can have guns. They can even carry guns if they have to, if they're security guards or if generally carry large amounts of money. That's the way it used to be, and you got a license to carry a gun. Otherwise, there was no reason to carry a gun. Only the bad guys are running around with guns. If they would make the laws stricter for people carrying a gun and put people in jail for carrying a gun, and make sure that they're not going to use it against other people, then maybe it'll help. The problem here is spelled in very, very simple terms. It's called MONEY. It's money. Right. And the gun lobby spends tremendous amounts of money to these politicians for them to just send their cause out there and never bend 1 inch. Don't allow anything to take away from this, what they feel is this interpretation by Heller that everybody has an absolute right to a gun. And it's all money. They don't care about little kids getting killed or anything. It doesn't make any difference.
Irv, when you talk about money, think about one of the solutions that they're coming up with. Arm all the teachers. Now, how much money will the gun manufacturers, the ammunition manufacturers make if the states pass laws that you have to arm teachers? Every teacher has to have a gun in their classroom, locked in a closet. How many guns is that? How much money? So when you talk about money, they advertise, they paint the weapons in pastel colors to appeal to kids. The very manufacturers
tell them they have to man up and buy a gun. That's, by the way, gun manufacturers.
Let's talk for a little bit, if we can, about the NRA. The NRA was not founded.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of the NRA, founded. Ulysses Grant, of course, was one of the founders, and General Ambrose Burnside. And it had to do with the fact that during the Civil War, it was very clear that the North lost a lot of money just on ammunition because their soldiers did not have familiarity with weaponry as the Confederates did. I mean, they outshot them, and so this was an idea that General Grant and Burnside said, look, should there be another uprising? Because you remember right after the Civil War, there was a thought that there may be another Civil War. So we need to train these Northern boys as to how to shoot. But that was for purposes of going to war. And then it became, that's why it's called the National Rifle Association, because rifles were what they were using in warfare. But the bastardization comes in again when we talk about that they have applied this absolute right to own handguns, to conceal guns, and that these semi-automatic weaponry is something that people can go in and just buy. There is no purpose for that. We did a series of shows about Emmett Till. And I don't know, Mark, you may know that there is someone that is now advocating and saying we need an Emmett Till moment.
Jay Johnson.
The thing that happened with
former Homeland Security czar.
That's right.
Jay Johnson.
Jay Johnson. We need an Emmett Till moment.
Right.
Now, Emmett Till, for those that are watching that may not remember the history, Emmett Till was a young boy from Chicago who was visiting relatives in Mississippi. And he went into a store. He and his cousins went into a store. There's a couple of things that are interesting about that, because he had a speech impediment, and he spoke with a little bit of a lisp that sounded like he was whistling. But beyond that, he was in a store, and there was a woman working at the store, and her family constantly left her to tend the store. She didn't want to tend the store, so she created this story to say that a black boy whistled at her, and therefore it wasn't safe for her to have to be in the store. Emmett Till was subsequently this group of men,
Klansmen,
went to his home, dragged him out, and they lynched him, and they shot him, and they threw him in, I can't remember the Takahashi, I think. But anyway, they threw him into a body of water. And when his body was found, the local sheriffs wanted her to have the funeral in Mississippi. She said, "My son is from Chicago. I'm going to take him back home." Took him back home, and then they were not going to open the coffin. And his mother, Mamie Till, made the brave decision to say, "I want the world to see what they did to my boy." And the coffin was opened, and that picture, very famous picture, which when you watch next week, you will see that footage. You'll see that photo. But it's a horrible one. But it shook the consciousness of the country to see a child in a coffin that had been so hard, whose body had been so horribly treated. So when Jay Johnson makes the statement that we need an Emmett Till moment, what he is saying is that most people, when we hear about these shootings, we don't really understand what is going on. It's horrible that these children died, but we are now learning that that weaponry causes such damage that
This
the parents couldn't even
absolutely terrible.
identify the children. This is not a weapon for a sportsman. This is a weapon. This is a killing machine. That's what that weapon of choice. What is it? The AR-15s. That is a killing machine. And when a person is shot with that, their body explodes. So no hunter would be using this to hunt, because anything that they hunt, theoretically, they want to be able to hang on their wall. They want to be able to have a trophy. Well, you can't do that if the animal's destroyed the way that the AR-15 destroys them. So I just wanted to interject that, because that's something that we were
As a
talking
matter of
about.
fact,
Yes.
the parents in Texas, when they went to identify their children's bodies, couldn't identify them because
Yeah,
they were
they
so
needed.
Yes.
their bodies were just unrecognizable. It was just, and by
But
the way, that
We
Emmett
and
Till moment
also that
was a flashpoint in the movement that really
yes.
forward and
but
their
the
black
the,
community.
th-
So
the
it was
thing
very, very
is,
important. And Jay Johnson was
the,
absolutely right. This is something that
but
should be done.
The Ted Cruzes of the world and the Rand Pauls of the world and the Mitch McConnells of the world, that doesn't move them. The power that they have and the power that the gun
I'm
lobby and the
sorry, Mark.
money
I
they
didn't. I
give
didn't.
them controls what they do and how they vote. And until we get them out of office, the carnage is not going to move them. They're heartless people. Uh, Ted Cruz has no solutions. He talks about arming teachers and locking the schools so the kids can't get out if there's a fire. You have Mitch McConnell that talks about mental health being the only thing, the red flags, and nothing about the guns themselves or the ammunition. So until everyone who is upset and horrified by what happens in these mass shootings gets rid of these people in the Senate, then nothing will be done. It hasn't been done since the last show we did on mass shootings. It hasn't been done since Columbine, and it won't get done until we get rid of these heartless. And I use the word we used to say about the Second Amendment: these heartless bastards.
Yes. Yes. Well, I
District
want to.
Attorney Krasner came out today and said, vote those people out who are supported by the gun lobby and support the gun lobby. Vote them out of office, and then you'll get things done.
Right,
Otherwise,
exactly.
And
nothing
that's what has happened.
significant is going to get done.
Exactly.
What also was interesting, and we talked about this, that in 1939 the NRA supported the ban on automatic weaponry.
The Tommy
In
guns.
19
That law's still in effect.
Machine guns, sure.
That law
the
is still in
machine gun,
effect.
That's
The
right.
Tommy guns, Thompson submachine guns. That law is still in effect.
and the NRA supported it, and they supported it because they realized law enforcement was outgunned.
By the mafia.
Now, yeah, and
Absolutely.
And Dillinger and Pretty Boy Floyd, yes.
exactly. And they all had them, and the police did not. So they made that an illegal weapon. So the NRA wasn't always on the wrong side of this argument, and even in the it was in 1969, and I have to look at my notes. 1969, there was a legislation, and the NRA supported that. But that was around the
The
same
the
time, as
black.
you pointed out, our show historian Mark Hoffman pointed out, that was around the time that the Black Panthers were walking around with, dressed in black with machine guns. So for some reason, we don't want these dangerous black guys to have these guns, but it is okay now for crazy kids to have
Yeah. Angela
them.
Davis
NRA wasn't always,
was
they were
not
not always the
capable
bad
owning a
guy.
gun, but crazy 18-year-old can, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, it's
yes.
really insane. Absolutely insane.
But
Well,
it's not going to
And you have
change
to
because they're
vote. Voting is the
that's
most important thing. It overcomes
absolutely,
money.
because these people only care about power. They're worried about being primaried by, if they don't support the guns 100%. And that's where it is. So, in Pennsylvania, we got to, change the Senate. What we call it's not running. We can put an anti-gun, Mr. Fetterman in, and we got to do that because otherwise, 5 years from now, let us all live and be well. We'll be doing a show and saying, "Hey, when are we going to do something?"
well, I want because voting is Irv's thing. I mean, he's always talking about voting.
Yeah.
I want you to, if you
Right.
can, Irv, just jump in and give him some understanding of when you mention, because this show emanates from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is
Correct.
right now at a crucial point. If Pennsylvanians don't get out and put allow us to replace a Republican senator with a Democrat. If that doesn't happen, we are all in trouble. So Irv, please, whatever you can think to say that would urge people to understand the importance. Pennsylvania is the importance of getting out and voting. This is like a big deal.
If you don't care about rights of women, if you don't care about gun laws, if you don't care about restricting your freedom, the only way to fight it is to vote. Because if you're going to put in guys like this Mastriano, who's a trumper to the extreme, and this Dr. Oz, who's a charlatan, and will go along with anything that they want to do, it's going to be your fault and my fault if we don't go out and vote. If we showed the power, look what happened in Georgia. Georgia, of all places, not Pennsylvania, Georgia.
Right.
Georgia
Yes.
elected this because people came out and voted. They elected a Jewish senator and a black senator, both Democrats.
Yes.
Now, who in the right mind would ever believe that could happen? But it happened because the people came out and voted. Thank God for Stacey Abrams. And this year in Georgia, Stacey Abrams is running for governor. If she puts the same effort in she did last time, she has an excellent chance of winning. I just came from Georgia, by the way, this morning, and I can tell you that there's a genuine movement in Georgia for Reverend Warnock in the Senate race and for Stacey Abrams in the governor. And here in Pennsylvania, that choice with Fetterman here against Mastriano and Josh Shapiro, of course, against Mastriano and Fetterman against that charlatan Dr. Oz. Get out and vote. This election is super important, absolutely important, because we can
Think about this.
Control of the Senate. We can have enough votes. Go, Mark. You chime
No, I
in.
said think about this because you're absolutely right. But think about this: these people that advocate unlimited access to guns care more about the life of a fetus than they do of a 10-year-old third or fourth grader.
Oh.
Just think about that. That should get
Absolutely.
you off the
If you
sofa, out
if you
the door.
marry what they want to do about the Second Amendment with their beliefs about the Second Amendment with their ideas about abortion,
They care.
and I like the way you tied that in there. When you marry those two issues together, you see just how dangerous this is.
They care more about the fetus than they
Absolutely.
do a 10-year-old fourth grader. It's that simple.
This has been another Conversations Across Time, the NRA and the bastardization of the Second Amendment. And on behalf of Mark Hoffman and Mr. Irv Madnick, we want to say thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. This has been Conversations Across Time. Good night.
conversations across time, 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 conversations across